All right, ladies, this screencast is going to pick up with the KansasNebraska Act. So if you kind of recall from the Compromise of 1850, which allowed California to be a free state, one of the other stipulations in that compromise was that the territories of New Mexico and Utah were going to be allowed to use popular sovereignty to determine representation, or to determine whether or not they would be a slave state or not. And so what happens is people living in the Nebraska territory, which you can kind of see a picture of in the map, people in the Nebraska territory said, well, we want to use popular sovereignty as well. But the problem with this is that people in the Nebraska territory are actually a part of the Louisiana Purchase. And that means that the Missouri Compromise line technically does apply to the Nebraska territory. So technically all territory above the line, which it is above the line, should be closed to slavery. So a senator from Illinois introduces this idea. His name is Stephen Douglas. He introduces this bill in Congress that proposes that we actually divide the Nebraska territory into two parts, Nebraska and then Kansas in the south, Nebraska in the north and Kansas in the south, and just that way make it like two different votes but allow both territories to choose what they want. And the congressional debate about this was very fierce because the Northerners very much see this only as a ploy to defend slavery and hope that there's a chance that those states could be made into slave states, because technically on their end they're not supposed to be regardless because of the line, but the South is all for it, and the KansasNebraska Act will be passed, which officially again separates the territory of Nebraska into two parts, Nebraska in the north, Kansas in the south, and they're both going to get to decide what they want. The Kansas territory is more populated than the Nebraska territory. That's the first one that's going to be up for debate, whether it will be slave or free state. So it's going to come down to a popular vote. So there's going to be an election day to organize a government, and they're either going to vote in favor of slavery or in favor of abolishing slavery and being a free state. And so basically whoever wins, whatever side wins, that's going to determine what type of state Kansas is going to propose to be. Well, on the day the elections were held, thousands of people who lived in Missouri snuck across the west border into Kansas and illegally voted in favor of the slavery side. They have no jurisdiction to be voting in another state's election, but they're doing it because they want Kansas to become a slave state. Of course, the abolitionists and the anti-slave supporters are going to find out about this, and they're infuriated, and it's going to cause this huge violence in Kansas between the two sides fighting over what type of government they should establish and what they should or shouldn't allow in terms of slavery. And you get the pro-slave supporters, they actually win by the end of the election, but again, they did so illegally. They probably didn't actually really win. It was just because the people from Missouri snuck over. So again, complete violence between the two sides in Kansas, and this is going to earn Kansas the nickname Bleeding Kansas, just because of the violence over this issue. Now, unfortunately, the violence isn't going to stop with Kansas. It's going to happen in Congress as well. Soon after the Kansas incident, Senator Charles Sumner of Massachusetts is going to give a very passionate speech that was called "The Crime Against Kansas." And in his speech, he is attacking the South, calling the South out for slavery, calling the South out for what happened in Kansas, singling out certain senators from certain southern states, and he is going to be waving his finger at fellow senator out of South Carolina, Andrew Butler, accusing him of being a racist and just all kinds of really aggressive comments. So this is Sumner making these comments about Senator out of South Carolina, Andrew Butler. Their names are on the screen, by the way. Well, Andrew Butler had other family in Congress, and he has a nephew who's a representative, Preston Brooks. Preston Brooks hears what Senator Sumner is saying about his uncle and proceeds to approach Sumner and beat him over the head with a cane until it breaks over his head. And this causes severe injury to Sumner, who wasn't able to return to his Senate seat for several years. We just see an all-out division between northern and southern, not only states, but also leaders who are now actually getting physical in the middle of the Senate floor. It's unbelievable. And while all this is going on, we do have the rise of new political parties. And this will be kind of the last section of the notes today. So what's going to happen is that the KansasNebraska Act is really upsetting to abolitionists and free soilers because they're recognizing, and free soilers are members of the Free Soil Party, if you remember, they're recognizing that this is just an opportunity for slavery to spread, which is not what they want. And so the people who consider themselves anti-slavery, anyone who is anti-slavery in the Whigs, Democrat, or Free Soil Party left their own parties to form a brand new party. So if you were an anti-slavery Whigs, Democrat, or Free Soiler, you left your party, you're going to form a brand new party called the Republican Party. The Republican Party was not an abolitionist party. It was a party whose platform opposed the expansion of slavery. So they just don't want slavery to expand into new territories. It's not really about abolishing it altogether. And again, it's more of an economic reason, not so much of a moral reason at this point, at least not for most of them and not for the general party. The other new party we're going to see is another third party, the American Party, which is also known as the Know Nothing Party. This party had a very specific agenda. It was anti-immigrant and anti-Catholic. The Catholics were not very well liked, by the way. America is very much a Protestant nation. The party was very secretive, and the nickname the Know Nothing is because, like, when they were asked super specific details about their party and members, they would respond with "I know nothing," to really hide under the radar. But their main agenda was to ban all immigration to the United States. They wanted to keep the population what it was and not allow any other type of person or culture to be able to come into the United States. We're seeing this idea of nativism, okay, the idea that the native-born citizens are better than the immigrant and that they should be, their interests should be focused on more keenly. So the American Party is very like nativist, if you will. With these new parties, we see the following candidates running in the election of 1856. A Republican candidate, an American Party candidate, and a Democratic candidate. And the Democrat, James Buchanan, is going to win. But the Republican candidate didn't do so bad, so this kind of shows that the Republican Party is going to be the next one to kind of carry its own against the Democrats, and we're going to talk about that more tomorrow. So I know it went fast. Listen, one last thing, and remind me I need to go over this one more time tomorrow, but I think I didn't emphasize this greatly enough, the KansasNebraska Act which kind of said, oh, actually, we're going to go against what the Missouri Compromise said and allow the two territories to decide by popular vote, that is going to officially and effectively repeal the Missouri Compromise. Like, the Missouri Compromise is no longer applicable if the Kansas-Nebraska Act was allowed to pass, which it was. I know I went fast. Write down any questions you have, and we'll discuss the rest in class tomorrow. I hope you'll have a good evening.